book for today is called Butterfly Boy. It's about a boy named Emilio. People in his neighborhood call him Butterfly Boy. As we read, we'll discover why butterflies are so important to Emilio. We'll also find out why this book is a good way to help us celebrate strengths such as belonging, kindness, and friendship. Let's start by looking at the cover. Look closely at the illustration. What do you notice? Emilio wheeled Abuelo, his grandfather, out into the sunshine, down the ramp that Papa had built. "Wait for me here, and I'll get a book," Emilio said, darting back inside. Mama and Papa said that Abuelo didn't understand words anymore, but Emilio was sure he saw a gleam in Abuelo's eyes whenever he read to him. He came back outside and pulled up a lawn chair next to Abuelo. Suddenly, Abuelo struggled to speak. He pointed with his good hand. "Abuelo, what?" Emilio asked. He followed Abuelo's eyes. 5 crimson, brown, and white butterflies fluttered around the garage wall. They lit, fanned their wings, flitted about, and landed anew. "Butterflies," Emilio said. He watched Abuelo's face while Abuelo watched the butterflies. Emilio knew that Abuelo was smiling inside, even though his mouth could no longer show it. I want you to pause and reflect. What have you learned about Abuelo and Emilio so far? How does Emilio know that Abuelo was smiling inside? It seems like as we've read the book, we've learned that Abuelo seems to have some kind of disability or some kind of illness with his old age that makes him unable to talk. And it seems like Emilio and Abuelo have a close relationship, and they seem to have this mutual interest in butterflies. So I think that because Emilio and Abuelo have this special relationship, he knows that he's smiling on the inside because it's something that he likes, butterflies. Every sunny afternoon, Emilio wheeled Abuelo out. Together they watched the butterflies. After a while, Emilio got within inches of them. They let him stay near as if they knew he would not harm them. Emilio's next-door neighbor, Mrs. Salazar, never called him by his name after that. She called him Butterfly Boy. When autumn came, the butterflies disappeared. Leaves of golden brown and crimson fluttered in their place. When the weather grew colder, Emilio wheeled Abuelo to the window instead, and he watched swirling snowflakes turn the world white and hungry sparrows gobble the toast crusts that Emilio tossed to them each morning. One day, Emilio came home from the library and yelled, "Abuelo, look at this!" He opened a book about butterflies. "Remember our butterflies? They're called red admirals, and listen to this. They're attracted to bright white surfaces. They like the sun on them. That's why they're always on the garage, Abuelo, because it's white. They're hibernating now, but they'll be back in the spring and we can watch them again." Emilio saw Abuelo's eyes glisten as he stared at the pictures of the red admirals. Why do you think the author includes these scientific facts about the red admirals in this fiction story? How might these details, such as the admirals being attracted to white surfaces, be important later in the story? Pause and think about that. Spring blossomed, and Emilio told Abuelo, "Not much longer." One sweltering, almost summer afternoon, Emilio gazed out the window during math class. His eyes opened wide with wonder. 2 red admirals fluttered through the playground and over the fence toward Mrs. Cruz's petunias across the street. Emilio squirmed like a caterpillar until the dismissal bell. He raced all the way home. "Abuelo," he panted, "guess what?" He was going to tell him about the butterflies, but Abuelo began making sounds in his throat. "What, Abuelo?" Emilio asked. Abuelo pointed with his good hand. Emilio swallowed his words in a gasp. The garage was blue. Papa was painting it to match the house, which he had finished in the fall. Emilio sped Abuelo down the ramp. "Papa!" he cried. "You can't!" Papa's head jerked up. "Can't what?" His voice was sharp. "Paint the garage blue. They won't come back, Papa. They only like bright white surfaces. Can't you change it back?" Emilio pleaded. Oh, I'm wondering if this is why the author told us earlier that the Red Admirals loved bright white surfaces, because it's coming into play now later on in the story, because Papa has changed the color of their garage and now it's blue. So Abuelo and Emilio are worried that those admirals won't come back. I want you to think about, though, the book shows us how Emilio's feeling. How do you think Papa is feeling at this moment? Pause and reflect. Papa took off his cap and wiped his brow. Change it back? After painting all day? Emilio saw frown lines on Papa's forehead as he replaced his cap and dipped his brush back into the can. He also saw the clouds in Abuelo's eyes. Emilio's shoulders slumped. He watched 5 red admirals flitting here and there, turning circles. They reminded Emilio of wilting leaves tossed in wild directions by autumn winds. Mama's laundry flapped gently on the line. Emilio watched as if he were in a trance. All at once he leaped up. 2 clothespins sprang apart and flew to the ground as Emilio grabbed his bright white shirt and scrambled to put it on. Then he stood, stiff and silent as a statue. A minute passed. 15 minutes. 20. 1 red admiral fluttered close. Closer. It landed like a whisper on Emilio's shoulder. Soon there was one on his other shoulder, and another on his chest. Mama came out to collect the laundry. She stood gaping as the basket tumbled from her hands. Papa finished his last blue stroke. He took his cap off and wiped his brow. Mrs. Salazar peered over her fence, clucking her tongue and shaking her head and wearing her broadest smile. "Incredible! Unbelievable, Butterfly Boy!" Papa was startled. "What?" he said. Then he understood. Emilio heard Papa call to Mama, "I'll be home in 20 minutes." "Where are you going?" Mama asked. Papa looked at Emilio and Abuelo as he answered Mama's question. "To the hardware for a few gallons of paint." "White. The garage needs painting." "Save some for my fence," Mrs. Salazar called. "It's about time I painted it too." How did Emilio convince his father that having a white garage was important? How does Papa's new plan show that he values kindness? Reflect on that. Emilio tried hard not to laugh. He felt as if his heart would burst from his chest. He kept his head still so the butterflies would stay, but shifted his eyes to see Abuelo's face. The corners of Abuelo's mouth turned up, and his eyes danced and twinkled like night stars. I want you to think about these 2 questions that we will be discussing in our live Zoom meeting today. The first question is, what do you think the author wants readers to appreciate about Abuelo and about the strengths of kindness, friendship, and belonging? The second question I want you to think about is, the illustrator chose not to use a realistic style when he created the images for this book. How did the artwork help show that Abuelo was enjoying nature and had a strong sense of belonging to his family and neighborhood? I look forward to seeing you in today's live Zoom to discuss.